Good evening, everyone, and I'd like to call to order our Lucan Biddulph Council meeting for Tuesday, March 21st, the first full day of spring, and it was magnificent. We do have one addition to the agenda, and that is a motion near the end, item 16.4, and it has to do with a staff member going to a conference. So today, March 21st, marks the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And this day recognizes that injustices fueled by racial discrimination take place every day, and that we all have a role to play in combating racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. While we have made incredible strides and efforts to fight racism and injustice, many members of our communities still experience discrimination and hate based on the color of their skin, their background, or their faith. I participated in an event today hosted by the London and Middlesex Local Immigration Partnership Project, and the stories that were shared in 2023 were shocking, troubling to say, and to say the least, concerning. It cannot be lost on any of us here in this room today that in this moment that we all have a responsibility to ensure that every day we do our part to call out discrimination and to ensure our community is safe and accessible to all. I know that you join me in solidarity with people from around the world as we call for an end to all forms of discrimination. The month of March has also been set aside by the VON organization as the month to bring awareness to the important services that they offer our communities. In particular, the March for Meals campaign focuses on the important Meals on Wheels program. This program is an integral part of our community services. It assists those individuals that cannot access proper meals for various reasons. Many seniors and adults with disabilities in our community are struggling to provide themselves with nutritious meals. And for those that cannot, the VON Meals on Wheels program is their lifeline. Beyond the delivery of these meals, this program also provides clients with important social interaction that we all know is vital to the overall health and well-being of individuals and community. The program relies on volunteers to be successful. I personally have been a volunteer with the Meals on Wheels program, and I cannot tell you how rewarding it was. If you are looking for ways to give back to our community, I strongly encourage you to reach out to the VON to see how you can help and assist them in making every day full of meaning and hope to those in need. On behalf of our council and our residents, I want to thank the VON for managing this incredibly important service to our community. And we also congratulate and thank all the volunteers who ensure that Meals on Wheels is the success that it is. We do not have to go into closed session, but we do have to go into a public meeting for planning. And I would ask for a mover and a seconder to adjourn our regular meeting at 6:04 to sit as a committee of adjustment under the Planning Act. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan. All in favor? And that's carried. So we have one application in front of us, and it's a minor variance application, and it's for 33596 Stonehouse Line. And at this time, I will turn it over to Dan to take us through.
Through the chair to members of the committee. So thank you for having me here today. I'm Dan Fitzgerald. I'm a planner with Middlesex County, and I do provide professional planning services to Lucan Biddulph here. So the application that we have here before us tonight is application A1/2023, and it is a minor variance application for a property located at 33596 Stonehouse Line, and that's more specifically located on the northeast side of the intersection at Elginfield Road and Stonehouse Line. And in this case, the applicant is requesting a minor variance for permission to construct an addition to an existing accessory building with a height that's beyond the maximum height that's permitted in the zoning bylaw. So the subject property is approximately 3.48 acres in area. It's occupied by a single unit dwelling, being the existing house, as well as 3 existing accessory structures. It's surrounded by agricultural lands that are primarily used for crop production on all sides. The property is designated agricultural under the official plan, and it's zoned a special agricultural A2 zone in the zoning bylaw. And that does permit single detached dwellings as well as the associated accessory structures, such as accessory buildings as proposed here. So as shown on the plan, the owner is requesting approval to construct an addition to the existing accessory structure that's located on the lands, which is north of the existing single detached dwelling. The existing the applicant is requesting a maximum permissible height of 4.4 meters, whereas the zoning bylaw permits a maximum height of 4 meters. And the request is based on the aesthetic design of the roof line, as well as to permit appropriate roof drainage between the addition of the new portion and the existing structure. So staff have reviewed the proposal against the Planning Act tests, and as well as the local official plan and the local zoning bylaw. I am of the opinion that the proposal does satisfy the Planning Act tests, as it meets the intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw. It's considered minor in nature, and it is considered appropriate and desirable development for the lands. And I would note that in circulation of the application, a question has arose regarding a recommended condition to the application, and that being the interpretation applied to the building being located in the same general location as indicated on the site plan. And the question was really surrounding that term general. What does general mean? Planning staff use the term general in order to permit what we would say is slight modifications to the plan if there are site-specific considerations that may arise during the actual construction of the building. So for instance, if the applicant were to move the structure due to site constraints such as grading, but the building was located in the same interior side yard of the proposal, we would consider or conclude that it does meet that same general intent of the decision that was brought before the committee. However, if an applicant upon applying for their building permit decided to move the structure to another yard, being like in the case of a rear yard, we would say it does not meet the same general location or intent, as the location could have additional impacts on surrounding properties, which we did not take into consideration as part of the recommendation or as part of the decision by the committee. So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity to everyone. I would note that no other comments were received by the public, as well as internal or external stakeholders. So given the above, I am recommending approval of minor variance as proposed, subject to the condition that the building be located in the same general location as shown in the applicant's submission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Dan, for walking us through that. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I asked that question about what does the word general mean? And I'm satisfied with the answer. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Dan. Dan, I know there was some changes. I think it was through Bill 109 that where staff would have the delegated authority for certain planning applications, and just seeing that it's like a minor variance, they can be I guess minor in nature, and would these type of applications fall under that that change where we don't see it come to council anymore? Would this fall under that, or what's the status of that delegated authority for staff to approve these?
Yeah, so through the chair, so Bill 109 and Bill 23 did different things in terms of requirements for whether it be committee input or staff input on different types of applications. So Bill 109 was specific to site plan control being delegated to staff. Bill 23 introduces the idea of being able to basically delegate what they refer to as minor zoning bylaw amendment applications. So the interpretation of minor in that case would be something like a holding provision removal or a temporary use bylaw. So it doesn't allow for the delegation of minor variance authority to staff.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the committee? I know that the agent for the applicant is joining us virtually. Mr. Vermeer, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, I believe everything has been covered.
Okay, I appreciate that. So you do have a recommended motion in front of you. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I think Dan's walked through it, but the motion for those watching is that the application be granted. You can find the reasoning online on our agenda if you're interested. If I can get a mover and a seconder for the recommended motion or a preferred motion. Councillor Westman and Councillor Hodgins. Any further discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to ask for a mover and a seconder to rise. The motion in front of us is to rise from the Committee of Adjustment and reconvene our regular meeting at 6:12. A mover and a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Regan. All in favor? And that's carried. We do have a couple of delegations this evening, and as always, it's great that they're in person. I think we took for granted how good it is to have people here in the gallery joining us. So I'd like to welcome to the delegation mic, Susan Mills from Huron Shores Area Transit.
I'm going to introduce myself. I get to be the Huron Shores Area Transit Chair, volunteer position. And before Susan goes into her slide presentation, we haven't been in Lucan Biddulph before, and so there's a history. And I'll give it to you as briefly as I can. It started in 2017. Susan at the time was General Manager of the Chamber of Commerce in Grand Bend. We organized a day-long event at the Legion, focusing on how to run a municipal transit service in a rural area. And we had 50 people show up from the various components of the different communities, the health, social services, the business communities, and everything else. There were no representatives from Biddulph, London, because we did it out of a simple email that got us 50 responses. In case you felt slighted, sorry. From that, we got tremendous support from all of the community groups. We applied to our Grand Bend Community Foundation. We got enough money to do a demand survey. And through the process, we started the ball rolling. And at the same time, concurrent, the Ministry of Transportation started a community transit grant initiative. I was co-chair at that point. Thank goodness I wasn't in charge of anything. The woman in true charge was Lorraine George, at the time the administrator for Kettle and Stony Point, and she'd run the Sarnia Transit Service for 25 years. She was the driver of the entire program. We applied to the community grant program. We got $2 million. It's been since raised to $3 million. And we started running a bus down through Lucan, and that brings us to being here. There was a period in between there. I remember, your worship, your name being raised. You came out and had a tour of the town with our mayor at the time, and he was quite pleasantly surprised that other people knew we had a transit service. So thank you for your interest at that point, and hopefully we'll engage fully with what Susan has to say now. But we're glad to be here, and we're glad to be of service to the community.
Well, thank you for having us here this evening, and for us to be able to bring you the news from the front line of local transit. If I'm going to leave you with one thought, it's going to be that although we launched in December 2020, and 2021 was supposed to be our first full year of operations, there were things like, stay-at-home orders, and you're open, you're closed, you're open, you're closed. So that really had a huge effect on a little rural transit system trying to start up. And so really 2022 was our first full year of operations. And I'm pleased to say that we're trending the right way. We are trending up. So if I could have the presentation, please, and then we can just go to the second slide, which will tell you a little bit about us. Yep, that's the one. So as Glenn was alluding to, we received $3 million for over 7 years. And essentially, we're about equity of access. The idea is that we want our elderly and our young to be able to stay in the communities and to make it possible for those without access to a vehicle or who cannot drive to be able to access all the same necessities and amenities as anybody else with vehicles do. We don't want to suffer the leaching, although Lucan Biddulph is not really suffering that, as the houses keep popping up, of residents to urban centers, just because they can't afford or cannot drive a vehicle. And you'll see that we have 4 municipal stakeholders officially as part of the community transportation grant and 1 First Nation. So I think we're a little bit unusual in that situation. We have so many partners. Next slide, please. It's just a few facts. We are a $5 everywhere fare until April the 1st. So that's a little while coming up. Children 12 and under ride free. We have 2 buses and 51 bus stops in 22 communities. And one of those buses services 3 routes. Sobeys in Grand Bend acts as our bus hub, enabling passengers to transfer from one bus to another and access more locations. So as an example, you could get on a bus here, on northbound bus, which now the bus stop is right out front of the municipal building, and travel to Grand Bend, switch over to the Route 3 bus, and you could be in Goderich at 1:12 p.m. Or for instance, you could say in the summertime, head to the beach and be in Grand Bend for the day and be back in Lucan for 6 o'clock for dinner and kids heading to bed. Okay, so next slide. This is a very summarized milestone development of where we started and where we are now. As I mentioned, 2021 was supposed to be the first year, but wasn't. And during that year, the fees, the long distance fee was reduced from $10 to $5 as a means to encourage people to get on the bus. There were 1,500 passengers during 2021, and they were mostly getting on the bus in the latter quarter of the year. As we came into 2022, we did some route adjustments. We added new stops and focused on marketing and improvements to the bus stop infrastructure and also customer communications. So each bus stop now has a number that, when texted to our toll-free 188 number, will provide information about when the next bus is going to arrive at that specific bus stop. And we can now send service notifications to our customers by 2 mobile apps: email, texting, Facebook, and the website. And I have the bus stop sticker that's supposed to go on the bus stop sign that's out here. And as you can see, it does have a specific number, so they can just text that in. And the QR code will take them to a special landing page with all kinds of contact information directly for Huron Shores Area Transit. So I'm going to leave this for Jeff so he can stick it on that sign when it's 20 degrees Celsius. And I noticed it's quite a ways up pole, which is why I still have the sticker, because I didn't bring a ladder with me when I came through town putting the stickers up. Most recently, we added 3 new bus stops. We have one at Army Camp Road on Lakeshore and Army Camp Road in Ippewash, one at McDonald's in Exeter, and one in Centralia. So these stops were added in response to passengers' requests and review of passenger traffic. And with that in mind, we are receiving requests from Lucan residents to ask if we could please put a bus stop at the south end of town. As one lady explained to me, when the new Foodland opens at the north end of town. That's a long walk for her. She's a senior citizen. And how's she going to carry her groceries home? As she lives in a seniors apartment building, I forget which street it's off of. It's on the east side of Main. I think that's the one. Yeah. So, I mean, that makes complete sense. And we just, if Lucan Biddulph is up for that, then we could work with Jeff and find a suitable location. We just need to allow for space for the wheelchair ramp to be able to come down. So the buses are accessible as well. And I think that would make a lot of sense. And you don't have to decide tonight, you can let me know. Next slide. So as you can see, we are on the up here. Our passengers, compared to 2021, our passenger trips have increased 505% to 7,854 passenger trips. And our revenue is up 322% to $33,000. And awareness of us as a transit system has gone up. Our Facebook has tripled. Visits to the website have doubled. And we started Google AdWords and Google My Business, and both of those have increased quite radically since we started those like September time. So we're going the right way. Next slide, please. So most used bus stops. So we have 4 routes. Route 1 begins in Sarnia and travels up to Grand Bend and back again 3 times a day. The Lambton Mall passengers include not just people who are shopping at Lambton Mall, but also a number of the Lambton College students who migrate over there after their classes, hence its popularity. Route 2, which is the route we're sitting on at the moment, it begins in Grand Band and goes down to London back and back twice a day. And the Masonville Mall stop is the London Transit stop 705. So we actually share a stop with London Transit on Fanshawe Road West near the RBC. And we drop off and pick up there twice each run. And our most southernmost stop is University Hospital. So once someone gets down to Masonville Mall, there's a plethora of London Transit buses that come in there that will then give people access to anywhere in London that they need or want to go. As you can see, the Lucan stop right now is the 3rd busiest stop on Route 2. And Lucan accounts for 3% of all passengers getting on our buses and 6% of all passengers getting off. So more are getting off to come in here than are actually getting on. So I don't know if they're all heading for the arena, but we'll see. It could be population growth. I think also that with the addition of a second bus stop, I think what we'll find is we'll find Lucan residents moving back and forth between those 2 bus stops as so much development is at the north end of town. Next slide, please. So this is routes 3 and 4. These configurations were finalized March of 2022. So these numbers are lower because not only are they on newer routes, they also don't represent a full year of passenger traffic yet. Route 3 begins in Grand Band and ends in Goderich, and it does that, moves through Blue Water. It goes to St. Joseph, Zurich, Hensel, and Bayfield, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then Route 4 starts in Grand Band and works its way through Park Hill, Elsa Craig, and into Strathroy. And it does that Tuesdays and Thursdays. So there has been some discussion that we were at North Middlesex last week, yes. And there was some discussion of whether or not we could alter that route. And we let them know we were certainly open to that. And we're going to do a survey with residents. They felt that their residents would like to come over to Lucan and to Highway 4 and head down into London rather than go down to Strathroy. So we'll have to see how that works out. So it could be even busier this way. And next slide, please. So how are we connecting with our customers? We're doing it all. We have billboard ads in Lucan and Exeter and Dashwood. And in fact, the one for Lucan is basically between here. It's closer to here than Exeter. It's on the east side of Highway 4 as you're heading north. We're running print ads and community papers, visitor guides, and college student magazines. And we recently started radio ads on MyFM and also Blackburn stations. We're running Facebook and Google ads and web and digital ads. And we have beautiful point of sale displays now for our smart cards. So we're in the process of still distributing those. And probably the biggest thing that we did was we graphically wrapped both buses. So now they are very visible on the road, which is great because they travel about 355,000 kilometers a year. And they are our moving billboards. Next slide, please. So here's where really it makes impact. We receive feedback through our Facebook and also through emails. In the written report I provided to council, there's quite a few more testimonials, but I just handpicked just a few here for this evening. One of those testimonials goes on to say, the service has allowed me to visit my mother without the need for a car. The service is amazing. It has allowed my daughter to feel more independent. The cheer support group members, and that's a group of mentally challenged adults. The cheer support group members are enjoying learning a new independence, being able to have a smart card, getting on and off the bus, and having some more independence and new skills. Next slide, please. So what are we going to do for 2023? Bottom line, we're going to increase revenue, and we're going to do that by doubling our passenger trips. We're going to reinstate the $10 fee for long distance travel. So if you're going from Grand Band down to Masonville Mall, that's a $10. If you're coming from Lucan down to Masonville Mall, that's $5. So it's divided up onto a zone system. We're going to generate advertising revenue. We're going to install transit shelters, and we're going to continue marketing using traditional, outdoor, web, and digital media. Next one, please. Now this one, we're going to think 2025. So right now we are fully funded by community transportation grant. In 2025, the goal is to graduate, and I don't use that word lightly, to graduate to the gas tax fund. And this is how it happens. In the feasibility study, our consultants believed that it's possible for us to be a sustainable transit system at the 35,000 passenger trip threshold. And what this slide outlines, and it's also bigger in your written report, based on a 2021 consensus population of 37,149 residents, that doesn't include Lucan Biddulph right now, is a combined number for Lambton Shores, Blue Water, North Middlesex, and South Huron. The gas tax fund would pay $8.44 per resident, and it would pay an additional 30 cents per trip taken to provide like a potential funding pool. So collectively, based on that population number, we would qualify for $324,279 per year in support of the transit system. There is 75% funding cap. In my figures, I'm using the 75% funding cap, but when I spoke with the gas fund people, they felt that in our particular system and our particular contribution to being our our fare box and our advertising, that cap wouldn't actually kick in. So we'd get the full 324,000. But for argument's sake, the Huron Shores area transit contribution for fare box and advertising at $339,740, and say 75% of that potential funding pool, which would then actually be $254,805. We take those two figures and subtract our operational expenses, and we'd be left with a net of $130,800 to be shared amongst the municipalities based on their population. So what we worked that out to is essentially $3.52 per resident. Right now, that's not even pulling on the gas tax fund money that would be sitting in that fund assigned to Lucan Biddulph. So in 2025, if you guys wanted to be part of the project, we would actually be able to access gas tax fund money based on your population to contribute towards the transit system. So if that was the case, we'd be looking at a much lower figure than $130,000. And potentially you might be looking at, say, $10,000 contribution in a year towards public transit. Just something to think about. So right now, we're not costing you anything. And finally, last slide, does anybody have any questions about any of this?
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. I just need your name. I think I got Glenn as the
Oh,
first name, and
I'm sorry.
that's okay.
I'm Susan
Yeah,
Mills.
I've got Susan, but we just need your name for the record, Glenn. Bailey, Glenn Bailey. Okay, perfect. So thank you very much for that presentation. I am going to open it up for questions. I personally have a number, but just to clarify, the gas tax, are you saying that the gas tax that you're going to try and leverage is beyond what the municipalities already receive, or you'd be taking our gas tax money?
If you sign on to the project, we would be able to access your gas tax funds.
And then we wouldn't get gas tax.
Yep, you would too. It depends, you would depend on how much that we would take, like if you want to say,
Transit specific.
yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, just wanted that clarified. Okay.
I think the justification has something to do with $70 million subway stations in Toronto.
Yeah. Okay, I will open it up to council first for any questions or comments on the presentation. Councillor Westman.
Hey there.
Hi.
I actually just received a text message from a resident in Granton asking, okay, is there a possibility in the future that they'll be able to expand the bus stops to some of the smaller communities like Granton? And I thought I'd ask that. So
I think that's feasible. I think with the additional money from the gas that would pay from the gas fund based on Lucan Biddulph's population in 2025, I think it would be feasible that would be possible.
oh, good.
That we'll
Okay.
be able to expand our routes and wrap them around a bit.
Yeah, because I think some of the smaller communities that are not on the main artery routes like Highway 4 and Highway 7 and things like that. I think some of those communities would greatly value that because, people may have employment opportunities in the Masonville area or, education, like get a trip into town for going to school or whatever. So I know that would be a value to the smaller.
And sometimes that's done with what they call an on-demand. So on-demand can bring those people that are, say, from little tiny hamlets and bring them into the main line in time to get on that main bus into a major area.
Yeah, because the comment was, if I have to drive to Lucan to get on the bus, it might be tough for me, to do that, and it's not practical. But yeah, so that's great that there's a potential for that. All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council? Councillor Regan.
I just have one really quick one. I'm looking at the numbers for like slide 5. So obviously, clearly it's a required service and it's something that people are using with the increases in passengers. And I know that COVID had a little bit, a lot to do that with, I guess. But I'm just wondering as far as our municipality, are we advertising? I should ask Lisa, are we advertising this? And because I have to be honest with you, I haven't seen it. Then maybe that's just me, but I'm just wondering where it's been advertised and people might be interested in finding more about it.
Yeah, we've actually included it on our newsletters, our e-newsletters, Facebook page. We share all the time. Any updates that they have, whether it's stoppages or updates to their routes, we share on social media as well.
All right, thanks. I got to pay better attention, I guess. So thanks.
Do you have any follow-up? I guess that's enough of a follow-up. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There was, I'm not sure if it was in the presentation or if in the attachment, but it was about the potential for transit shelters. And I'm guessing you would try to target the areas with the highest ridership, but would there be any consideration for transit shelters within Lucan Biddulph or within our pickup area on Route 2?
Yes, the answer to that is yes. I'm actually filling in another grant application to pay for transit shelters. So if I'm gonna ask for 100,000, I might as well ask for 300,000 and see what I get. So my goal is that every community would have at least one transit shelter. And some more depending on where they are, if it's very open space. But yeah, the answer would be yes to that.
Okay, and a follow-up on that one, we do have school buses that pick up like groups of students within Lucan. And I know right at Main Street and Chestnut, just right here, there's always a large congregation of students. I always feel bad when I see them out in the rain or in the snow or it's freezing cold. So maybe there's some potential for coordinating with the Thames Valley District School Board, and maybe they'd be interested in partnering for something that benefits their students as well.
Sure. I mean, that sounds like a very big transit shelter. We were thinking of something along the lines of like a 4x8, but so that would be a bit much bigger one. So yeah, we could definitely work with them and work that out. Yes.
Okay. And then with the fare increase to grow revenues, what is the difference between long distance versus local? Where do you draw that line?
It's based on the sort of the number of kilometers. And what we wanted to do initially when it was set up, it was always a $10 for long distance and $5 for local. So what we're doing is we're actually going back to that original configuration for sustainability. And we decided this time around that we would try as much as possible if we were traveling between the smaller communities to consider that as being local. And when we're traveling down to the spokes, going down to London, Sarnia, up to Goderich or Strathroy, that would be a $10 trip depending on where you started from. The full rates are actually posted on our website right now. There's a handy little calculator you can put in where you start and where you finish, and it will tell you how much the fare is. So if, for instance, someone from Lucan is going to Grand Band or is going to Goderich, it's actually Goderich would be a $10 trip. Grand Band would be a $5 trip.
Okay, thank you. Maybe more of a comment, but I see the large part of the operating cost is the fuel for the buses, and in 2022 it was close to $140,000. And wondering if you guys are looking at options for electrification of the fleet or using electric vehicles. I know that was a concern of some folks that saw, especially through the pandemic times, empty buses or I guess they're like mini buses, but it's obviously putting on a lot of kilometers, 350,000 kilometers a year. So just thinking about the greenhouse gas emissions, are there consideration or looking for funding for electric vehicles?
I can answer that question.
I'd wanted to make a point about greenhouse gases. She'll go into electrification. Transit of any variety, while the bus emits, as long as there's fare paying passengers on it, it does reduce greenhouse gas emission under the broad umbrella of transportation. Whether we could proceed to electrification, she has the details.
The short answer is no, because of the kilometers that we actually travel. And the last conference I went to in the fall, there was a lovely, beautiful, sexy 20-person, bus with the wheelchair and everything else, wheelchair ramp and everything else. And I was speaking to the sales guys. So, I mean, obviously they would like to sell me on an electrified vehicle. And so I was talking to them and they said, well, which transit system do you represent? And I told them, and the guy said, he goes, you can't, yeah. He said, because of the number of kilometers in terms of a bus run that your buses are running and the number of runs they're doing in a day, there's not enough time to charge them between runs. And that exacerbates when the weather gets colder. So he said, the technology is not there yet for you. I'm like, okay. So, maybe this in 5 years is going to be a different conversation completely, that in 5 years, that battery retention technology will be there. But right now, simply because of the number of kilometers we're traveling, they're telling me we can't do it.
Okay, thank you. Last question, do you have I guess a timeline on when we in Lucan Biddulph could expect a request for funding or inclusion into your program? Noting that right now we're not in it, but we are sort of able to participate in it. Is there a timeline? I know 2025 is when the gas tax runs out.
Yeah, we have to actually start the application process in terms of budgeting and working on it in 2024. I will be back before all of the councils long before that to give an update on 2023 and how we're running. And then also to talk about that application process and invite you to join in at that point. And then the thinking is that would give all the municipalities time to look at their budgets and be able to, do that April 1st, that end of March, beginning of April, switch over for the new budgets coming into the new fiscal years. So absolutely, we would be back for this council to invite you to join us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions, Deputy Mayor Manzer?
Yeah, I just got a couple questions. One, the QR code, I think a lot of people are used to using that. That's great, other than you need a ladder to scan it. So Jeff, maybe we should look at lowering it just on that comment, because I do think a lot of people use it, but it's going to be useless if that's the case. We obviously need to lower it then.
You can actually, it's still good if you hold your cell phone up. And
I didn't, yeah, she said you need a step ladder. I didn't realize you could get it that far. I've
Well,
never done that. Gotcha.
for me to actually stick the sticker on the sign, I need a step ladder, but if you just point your cell phone up,
It'll
will
catch it.
focus, it will catch it.
Okay, good.
Absolutely.
No, that's all I was wondering. That tax or the transit shelter, what would be the expectations of how often to clean it and who would clean it?
If we pay for it and get it installed, we would expect Lucan Biddulph to look after it.
Yep, and then expectations for cleaning it every day, or what would your thoughts be?
I would think that probably, I don't even think, maybe once a month.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
No. And then what's violence been like?
I'm sorry?
Violence. What's violence? Has there been issues
We actually
with
have had
passengers or drivers?
had no situations on our buses whatsoever. But we have been proactive. We've installed security cameras on both buses. So they are focused on the passenger compartment. And so if there was violence, the role actually is that, the driver is watching the road. But as a passenger, if they see some violence, if they see an illegal act, the onus is actually for them to call 911 and call the police, and the bus will stop and deal with the situation. If there's a particularly sort of a belligerent passenger who's up walking around and making noise and whatever, that's obviously going to catch the driver's attention, and their role, they are trained in those situations, and they're trained to pull over, they're trained to deal with that passenger. And if need be, they will call the police, and that passenger will be removed and possibly banned entirely from the system. But to this point, we have not had any situation like that.
And currently, if there's a shortfall then in revenue, which I think there is now, then are the stakeholders responsible for adding what's needed? Or do you carry a deficit forward, or how does that work?
Well, right now we're completely on a grant. You're talking like in 2025.
Yeah, then the stakeholders would be responsible for any shortfall.
Yeah. But in terms of the numbers, by that point, we will have good operating finances, because by that point, it'll be 3 years of financial operations. We will have a better idea of what all of our costs are going forward. And, there's always an opportunity to raise the fare if we need to, $1 here, $1 there. But to also keep the cost as low as possible for participating municipalities.
That'd be 2025.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, any further comment? So I did ride the bus back in 2021. Some colleagues and I, we did a whole bus tour. We did all the routes in southwestern Ontario because that was the year that the buses really started to take off because they were all receiving the provincial grant from 2020. And it was neat how we were able to connect communities and connect systems. So Middlesex right now, our grant program is to the east. And our route runs from Thames Centre into London.
Okay.
And at the moment, that's actually being looked at, being reworked. So my question is, because it's interesting that you brought up North Middlesex running to Lucan. Have you been in talks with the Middlesex group to see what they're doing with their routes? Because the whole point is to connect all of these transit routes throughout the area. Right now, there's a study going on between all of the South Central counties and their transit systems and how they can all be connected. So are you part of that discussion? Are you at the table talking about how we can connect more communities using the transit routes that are already out there?
We are part of the Southwestern Transit Group Committee. And they have meetings about 7 or 8 times a year. So we are part of that committee. We've been talking more to PC Connect on the Perth County side. I have not asked the Middlesex folks where their transit route exactly is going, but now that you've mentioned it, I will. To see, especially if they're looking at it and we're re-examining the one going through Park Hill and Elster Craig to see if there's connections that we can obviously make.
Well, they've done obviously the same sort of surveys trying to find out where their transit system is best aligned. And, they are getting a lot of traction about this whole area connecting, Burr, Ilderton, that whole route, because right now Ilderton's not serviced at all.
Okay.
So if there was a way, rather than, having double buses crossing each other to try and connect. So I would encourage you obviously to talk to the Middlesex folks. And then you did mention, is there any, I congratulate you on the success that you've seen and how you've been able to get the traction that you have, because not every pilot project out there across the province. I have to remember the province is funding all of these pilot projects like across the province. And there's a lot of them that are not seeing the success that you're seeing. But when you think about beyond what you're offering, have you thought about an on-demand system, to the very point that Councillor Westman made about, the smaller communities that obviously it doesn't make sense to put a bus route in there, but maybe something on demand?
Absolutely. I mean, we thought that we would be able to add on demand towards the end of this year. And unfortunately, we just don't have enough money left to us to make that happen. The cost of fuel, the cost of everything going up, our rate with Voyago, who is the contractor, their rate for the next 2 years is going up. So it begins to niggle away at what you are actually able to do. With the on-demand system as well, we need to bring in a piece of software, and the Southwest Transit Community Group does have a proposal from Blaze that if they were to come into all of our community transit systems, there'd be a cost savings if we all adopted that same system, which makes sense. For us, that would mean that we actually would have overlap on certain things. So we would have to change some contractors around. But then there's still a cost to that software. And there's a cost now to, usually it's vans that they'll use wheelchair accessible vans to bring the passengers into the core routes. And there's just not enough money. I'm keeping my eye on it. We'll have to see how the year goes out, but between everything else that we need to do, it's an expense that unfortunately it wasn't conceived of when the original grant was put forth and the money was set in 2018. And that's the budget we're still working with is the 2018. So, you know, as the years have gone on, you can appreciate that margin of flexibility has really decreased quite rapidly as come into 2023.
And then, do you have a demographic study as to who's riding your bus?
We don't at this point. I'm working on a survey with Natalie Core from North Middlesex to sort of garner some of that information. Anecdotally, I can tell from the people who are contacting me through Facebook, through phone, and through email, a lot of 20-somethings. Our drivers are reporting that they're getting a lot of 20-somethings. They're getting single, like a parent with children, where they're traveling for the day. So in my mind, you know, that younger generation coming up, they don't perceive of vehicle ownership in the same way those of us, say, in our 50s do. And there's a lot of them that don't drive. It's not an importance, it's not a motivator for them. And so I think that generation is very adaptable to public transit. They're very open to it, and they're going to use it. I also think that, you know, with the cost of living, there's families with one car. The breadwinner takes the car, but the other parent still needs to be able to get out and do errands. And so when you have a transit system that children 12 and under can ride free, that makes it very affordable and accessible. So we are finding that, and especially during the summertime, heading to the beach with the kids for the day, that's been a big one. So that's what I'm seeing. I think initially the thought was there'd be a lot of elderly people, and that's not what we're seeing.
And then your stakeholders. So just to be clear, understanding that right now the programs run completely with provincial money, but the stakeholders, so your Lambton Shores, First Nations, South Huron, Blue Water, and North Mid, they haven't given you any seed money?
No, there wasn't a need to. No, we had the money we had, I guess, as a seed that you would think of as a seed money would be from the Sunset Community Foundation out of Grand Band that initially paid for the feasibility study, but the grant itself has paid for everything else, including me.
Okay, great. That's great. So there's no other further questions or comments. Thank you for coming. We always like seeing the bus go through town, that's for sure. And we certainly wish you the best of success and continued success, and hope that you can build on what you've been doing.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If I can get a mover and a seconder to receive that report for information, Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Westman, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And as well as our friends from Huron Shores are leaving, I'm going to welcome the Asable Bayfield Conservation Authority up to the desk. And joining us tonight are Brian Horner, the General Manager, and Mary Velez, the Healthy Watersheds Manager. And it is great to see you in person. It's awesome. So thank you very much. Before I turn it over to you, I was at the partnership meeting last week, or partnership event last week, and Councillor Westman and Councillor Hodgins were there, and it really was a nice evening. And thank you very much for the invitation and hosting us.
It certainly was. It was great to see you there. You've done part of mine is already said about the introductions, but I would, if I may, take this time. At the Partners Appreciation Night, we recognized not only staff for their years of service, but directors. I'd like to thank Alex for his years of service. It was certainly we appreciate you on our board, and we hope that our education department soon takes full advantage of your offer to help them out. And I will say, while it's only been 2 meetings, I'm amazed with the questions already that Jaden has raised, and staff have already said, wow, you guys got yourselves a good one there. So anyhow, thank you. So why are we here? I'm going to try to give a big picture on this, and then we're going to let Mary do some of the more details and maybe answer some of the questions if need be, but why are we here? So for some of you, you're probably all aware with the CA Act changes coming 2024 for some of our services, which the province deems as non-mandatory, and we're going to get into those, what we say is category 3, for us to levy our member municipalities come 2024 and beyond, we're going to have signed cost apportionment agreements with each of our member municipalities. So that's come for 2024. That's where the financial impact is. And we're hoping to have these agreements in place with our member municipalities by the fall of this year. And why is that? That's when we come into our budgeting process. So we're hoping that that's the case. I will say, I believe, I'm going to look to the left there. We don't have the flats, my fault. We don't have the flashy slides, but I do have a little bit of a handout that I believe everybody has seen. And it's some 20 pages, and really it's like 3 different documents. The first one being, it's kind of our guide to the actual apportionment agreement. And there it is. Good thing I have one in front of me so I can see it, because my eyes are getting older. They're not that great. Again, this document here, it's basically, we try to put in the background for the authority, as well as some of the components in the agreement. And if I may go to page 2, the one thing I draw to your attention at the bottom of that page, that's where we kind of have a breakdown. We've got category 1, category 2, and category 3. And you'll see under category 3, it's in reality, it's four service areas that we have there. And we'll get into more detail, but I want to address those 4 service areas that the province has deemed non-mandatory. I like to say that the province may do it, but I think they're locally mandated. We've been doing these 4 services for our member municipalities for decades. And it's in 2011, we had a conservation strategy developed by our community. And those are the items that they wanted us to be doing. And we've included those in our 2015 watershed management strategy. And every year when it comes budget time, we look at, those programs, how do they fit into that watershed strategy? Do they? And they do. And that's what we base our budget on. The other, again, page 3, it just talks about the financial contribution considerations, and it's not going to happen until 2024. The other one in that document, it's in the very last page, page 6. And I apologize if I'm going too fast. That table 1, that's, our board, and Mr. Westman will, he was there when it was asked. That table was asked to be included because that's the table of our, based on our 2023 budget numbers, that shows the levy dollars that we assess to our member municipalities for those category 3 items. Across the board, it was some $200,000. That represents probably roughly about 15% of our levy that we levy to our member municipalities. And the one thing I want to show in there, well, we have it for each member municipalities by those different service areas. And I'll bring it up again. That $204,000 that is, I'm going to say is local dollars because it's our member municipalities. That $204,000 is leveraged by another little over $1 million. You see at the very top, it says total cost of those projects is some $1.2 million. So yes, we realize that these are, what the province says is non-mandatory, but these are where we're getting our big leverage dollars. Okay. The next part of it, the next one is our actual cost apportioning agreement, the draft agreement. And I say it's a similar format, what you'll see from other CAs. And I don't know if you've, speak of turn, I'm not exactly sure the timing. I don't think you've seen anything from Upper Thames yet, but I don't know. But we have, all CAs have been talking, so they're somewhat similar in their format. I also will say, just for some history, a process that we've went through is we come up with a draft agreement, and we met with your seniors, all member municipalities, senior staff back in the fall to see, okay, this is what we're thinking for an agreement. we've asked for their input. We've got their input and we've made some revisions. It didn't change too much from what we originally showed. And then we went to our board in December, and then this is what they approved to send out, and this is what's before you. A couple of things I will say in this agreement. It's right now we're proposing and this came back actually from feedback from staff, senior staff. We're proposing a 5-year agreement. And then after that, it would be a 4-year agreement. The reason for that is, well, we've tried to stage it in there. After that, it will be in every council's midterm. So we have, that's what we're thinking, that every council would get a kick of the can, per se. I should apologize, I'm getting taped, aren't I? But that's what we're proposing. And then, recognizing that new council, when they come on their first year, they're very, very busy. So we're looking at it in midterm. That's what we're proposing. I will say the agreement for the services are for 5 and then 4 years, but it's for the service. You'll also see on Schedule A in this, we have costs. Those are the costs for those different service areas for the 2023 budget. I foresee that what we would be doing, we would have an agreement with everybody for the actual service, but every year we would still be coming back to you with Schedule A. Okay, but from a budget standpoint, you'd be agreeing to the service, and then it would still be coming annually at budget time that we'd be coming back to you. Okay. The other document that you see, sorry, before you go here, so what you see, if you stay right, if you just go up just a little bit, yeah. So those numbers there, so that total program cost number you see, the 1.263, that's the exact same number that you saw in that other document on table 1. And the other components is what the federal provincial contribution, self-generated revenue, our municipal portion of the agreement, the 204, and that 12,000, that's what Lucan Biddulph's portion is of those category 3 items. The other document that you'll see that I've also included, it's the Beyond 23 document. This is a document that we brought to, one more bit. Yep, perfect. This is a document that we brought to the senior staff to help explain some of our services. And in the very last page, it has a little more in the table, and it has a little more breakdown. Okay, what's included in category 1? What's included in category 2? Category 2 is very minimal, and what's included in category 3. And it also has, and again, those are the descriptions that I'll let Mary will talk more to. And then it also has the actual sources of funding from the 2022 is and based on the different categories and where we get our funding. Interesting to say, I will say in category 1 under that graph, the province says category 1 items are mandatory. And you can see it, corporate services, natural hazards, provincial water quality, conservation land. The province says it's mandatory, and I'd like to say that that's where the province is funding the least amount, at 11%. So now I will let Mary go into more detail. I'm not going to completely hand off the mic.
Okay, well, thanks for your time this evening. I understand there are a lot of different issues that come before council, and I really appreciate the time taken tonight to hear about watershed management. So when we think about watershed management, sometimes people get confused between floodplain management, rivers, and watershed management. So right now, where we are right here is a watershed. The water flows into the Bend Drain, into the Little Sable, but people don't think about water when we're sitting here right now. But the development that is happening on this landscape right here, whether that's agricultural landscape, this particular town, parkland, what have you, water will move across that landscape. The best way to manage water is at that smaller scale. As a conservation authority, we can help to manage that water, but we cannot, unless you're right beside the river, going to tell people or suggest what is best from a development perspective. up in the headlands, up here and in other areas in our watershed area. It's more about education. It's more about providing conservation services such as our stewardship programs, such as our monitoring to find out how well we are doing in our environment, our local environment. So it's those services that are the category 3. And the other services, the more floodplain management, the planning and regs, the permit application process, those are more the category 1. And those are really applicable in a less part of our watershed, maybe about 20% of our watershed. So in 80% of our watershed, where we really can make that difference in holding the water, those are programs that are the category 3 programs. And as Brian mentioned, and as I know there's quite a bit of information in the package that you've received, that those funds, the investment that is made by the local municipalities is then leveraged to bigger dollars through grant proposals to provide for these conservation services. So, and I just want to point out one thing with one of the tables is, you saw, I think, $1,200 leveraging quite a bit more money. And the input for the federal government was somewhere around 500,000, provincial and federal governments. Those are monies really to support landowner private stewardship. And those dollars go to projects on the ground that help to hold that water. Holding that water in more and more locations provides an investment to the municipalities downstream, because they're not going to be as prone to flooding and erosion that they would have been had those projects not gone in. So I know that Brian told that I was going to get clarify things, and maybe I've made it more difficult, but I think the important piece to understand here is that when we talk about watershed management, it is really these programs, the private land stewardship, the conservation education, and monitoring that contribute to those programs. And it is those funds that we do leverage to get more projects on the ground. So I think I'll hold my explanation here, and maybe you have questions, or maybe we've just made it more complicated.
Okay, thank you for that. Questions or comments from our council? Councillor Regan.
If I could ask a question. So I'm just wondering this, is there any opportunities or have they been explored with respect to Ministry of Education with these sorts of things? Because this is becoming more and more important. We're having more and more, severe events and it's a lot of people are very, there's a lot of people very interested in this. And I'm just wondering if there's any other partnerships. When we talk about education, I know Councillor Westman is involved in the education aspect of it. I've done it as well, environmental science courses, but I'm just wondering if there's any other opportunity with conservation authorities to partner with the Ministry of Education with respect to courses and more courses. Again, it's becoming more and more important, I think.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is, we work as much as possible with as many partners as possible. And you've pointed out a very good one with the education ministry, the education. That is possible. We have done projects with them in the past. We also do work with obviously local school boards to run outdoor education programs. Then the kids are then bused to our conservation authority areas, or our staff go out on site to deliver school programs. There's also the high school majors program that we have partnered on in the past and try to make opportunities to get funding for that. So if you were to look at the education piece per se, there is a way it's broken out there. Those dollars are also leveraged. So for every dollar that the municipalities put in, it's raised, I think, 2 to 1 at least. And
for the education one, it's probably about 50-50 with
Yeah.
like the levy and what we generated in self-generated revenue. So it's 50-50.
so, and that'll be other partners that, like you mentioned, school boards, the Ministry of Education.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Manders.
Yeah, I got a couple. It's too bad. Again, the provincial government puts us, obviously, look, they're representing their constituents. We represent our constituents. It's never good seeing non-mandatory, it's just not. And it's too bad. So a couple of things, is it all in or not on the category 3 of different municipalities? you got staff time in that. So if 4 or 5 decide not to, what is your, how are you going to push just those expenses to Cat 1 and 2?
It's a good question. I raised this and I don't think I've ever got a solid answer. I raised this at the very beginning 2 years ago. This is, and I've also thrown Upper Thames under the bus every time for 2 years too. If for programs, let's be honest, for some of these category 3 programs, if London signs on, Upper Thames can run the program. For us as a rural CA, and it will be up to us, if one, maybe 2 of our member municipalities, depending on the size, if they chose not to do one of these and go back, it isn't an all in or, okay, if we don't want to do one, do we do not all 4? That's not the case. I mean, it's up to the municipality, but I go back. If we have 1 or 2 decide not to do one of these 4 programs, it would be my recommendation, short term, okay, we look at, and again, we'd take it to the board and they'd ultimately decide what we would do. But I would say, okay, short term, we have one municipality doesn't want to do it. Okay, we run a full program, but probably I would suggest we charge that one, and it would probably be based on, again, my thinking out loud, that what would that apportionment be of that cost to that municipality? And that dollar we could borrow short term from reserve, but then if that municipality asks us to do it, we would increase a charge of fee. And then it goes back short term. That's what I'm thinking. Long term, well, it's probably not good to borrow from reserves long term to fund operations. And the other part of it, when you said 4 or 5 member municipalities, if it's 4 or 5, maybe that program isn't viable.
Right.
So that, that's where the decisions we'd be, as staff, we'd be coming back, and I suspect our board would ask us to, that we would be going back to them with recommendations again. Short term, if it's 1, I can see that we would still be doing it. If there's more, if there's a number, and depending on the size, maybe that program's not viable, and unfortunately we may not be able to do it.
Right. Just how we decided. I've got another question with our delegation here and with Dan here, and that's not really related to this. Do you want me to park that? I just like to ask another question, but
Well, no, you can ask another question.
it's not to do with the watershed. That's all.
Okay, yeah, I think
Do
that
Yeah.
if it's in keeping with this, and even though it's to Dan, I think that makes sense.
Well, you can remove my question, I guess. No, I was curious on when we have planning reports and things like that, we'll see a no comment. And I think sometimes you're not under the jurisdiction of what we're actually asking. So you must, whether you look at do we send the ASABL for comment when it's not under their jurisdiction, under their land, and it costs $100, I think, to our applicant. And then meanwhile, it may be, or is it only what we send them is always under their jurisdiction on all planning stuff? Or sometimes we just send it to them for review and it's not.
So through the chair, Deputy Mayor. So what I would say is at the county and the municipal levels, we always err on the side of caution. We circulate everything. So in our jurisdiction, the ABCA generally has jurisdiction everywhere except for certain parts of the eastern portions of our municipality or township. In those situations, we wouldn't circulate them if it's outside of their entire jurisdiction area. For Granton, specifically, I think it goes to UTRCA. But with respect to fees for review by the conservation authorities are only charged if the lands are subject to regulated lands.
Gotcha.
So if there's no regulated lands within that parcel, there's no fee for review.
And my thing was more of a time, even though they're opening the email and looking at it, it's not just, a waste of time. So doesn't sound like we do that.
That's correct.
Okay, no, very good. Thank you.
That's it. Okay. Any other questions, Councillor Hodgins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Deputy Mayor Manders did ask the question I was going to ask about that scenario that, because it is brought up in the report there, if one municipality decides to opt out. And I hope that all municipalities can recognize the benefits that the ABCA brings to these category 3 programs. And I think if you look at these programs and what they offer and what they do to benefit the health of the watershed, it really is a really good investment, I think. So it's important for, I think, municipalities and councils to understand what these category 3 services are and what they do. And looking at Lucan Biddulph's portion of this, we're paying less than 1% of the overall cost. So of the $1.2 million that's leveraged, we're paying $12,000. So I think it's a really good investment within our community. So I'm in support of this, and I'd like to see Lucan Biddulph maybe see if we can be a leader here in getting our cost apportioning agreement set up first, and sort of set things in motion for other municipalities to get things going. I'll leave my comments at that. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Councillor Hodgins. Any other questions or comments? I guess just to the category 3, and I would agree with you, Councillor Hodgins, that the programs under that obviously benefit the whole of the watershed and the lands that you're responsible for, and that our dollars under that category 3 is and I don't say this dismissively, but minimal. So I understand what you're saying. But I guess to the end user, maybe a better understanding, and this doesn't have to happen tonight. It can happen, you know, in coming months or as we prepare to get into this agreement. A better understanding of what those 4 programs are that fall within category 3, and how it does benefit a Lucan Biddulph resident. Maybe that would be some communication that could be shared in the coming time. As I say, don't expect that tonight, but maybe just a better understanding of what those programs, like the Huron County Sentinel Well program. What is that? What is the benefit to the, you know, a Lucan Biddulph resident, that sort of thing? Because those are questions that we will have. And the better we can answer it and understand it, I think it's the better for the partnership.
If I may, Madam Mayor, I get just a 2-part question. Number one, can you tell us what the impact is of having category 2 programs sort of yanked away from you? Like, what does that do to your staff? What does that do to your overall budget? And then part 2 of the question is, does this agreement take into account the removal of sort of category 2 services?
Yeah, good. If I may, I mean, this agreement has nothing to do with the category 2 at all. It's just category 3. And in a nutshell, as of right now, the elimination of those category 2 for the heritage, if you just look at it's minimal, but where it is a little tricky for us, like at this stage, I don't see, you know, staffing wise, it's going to have an effect. But in reality is that category, and Mary can help me out here, that category 2 item that was eliminated, it's not necessarily done by just one person at our office. There's a number of people that were involved in that. Dollar wise, it's not that large, but it's just, you know, there's a lot of people were involved in it. And so it's a little bit of each person. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so the category 2, if the question is about the category 2, that was more about the plan review from a natural heritage perspective. That is true. It is not, it wasn't a big portion of one person's job, but it is an important piece from a watershed management perspective. So from the perspective of, if we think back to that point about watershed management and different kinds of land use having different ability to generate runoff, those wetland and woodlot areas are holding water and they are providing some benefit And I can, provide more information about the ecological goods and services that these areas provide. So that is a loss to watershed residents when they're not being reviewed completely from the perspective of watershed downstream issues, whether that's flooding, erosion, degraded water quality downstream, or fish and wildlife habitat loss. So that is a loss that way. But in terms of our organization and our review of natural heritage, that wasn't a person's position.
Does that answer?
Yeah, we more detail.
And to the point of category 2, I mean, we've had that discussion. So now like CAs aren't responsible and can't be involved in that, but that's work that still needs to be done. And who's going to do that?
As
Yeah.
as one of our GMs from down the GTA area said to us in one of our GM meetings, we didn't put ourselves in this position. Nor did you. So.
I mean, I know at the county level, we've had discussions because we've all, as I say, the work's like that still needs to be part of the discussion when you're developing and what you're doing to land. And there could be some creative opportunities available, but I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just maybe one more comment. So, and we've had this discussion before, how do we do this? And we are specifically prohibited from even asking them. Like, it's not as if we can take that and add it to category 3. We're prohibited from doing that, which really, like, it's a head scratcher from our side of the table. And I think from your side of the table too as well, Brian.
Yeah.
It just makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of what we've had the correspondence back when it first came out, we've been of the opinion, like, the municipalities should have the choice in how they get their services done.
I think has been, sort of well-known issues sort of in Eastern Ontario with battles between municipalities and conservation authorities. But certainly we've had a good working relationship with the ABCA, and that really come out of left field. And it really, I think the impact is yet to be known, but I think we're gonna feel it at some point, because there's going to be some applications where we need to have those comments. And for what did you guys charge before? $150?
Yeah,
Something like that. We're not going to be able to get a consultant's report for $150. And where does that cost going to go? Like, the provincial government's supposed to be trying to make development easier and cheaper. Well, that's certainly not going to make it cheaper. So I think it flies in the face of what their goal was. But anyway, I don't know. I have no answer for that. So
I don't think many do. But to the point that, Brian and then Ron makes, like, if you had a problem with somebody that you're getting service with, and you find somebody else to get service from, you work that relationship out. And I mean, now you don't even have that choice. So anyways, we could talk around this, for hours, I'm sure, and still not be able to solve anything. I will give council one last opportunity to ask questions. I want to thank you for the presentation tonight. Certainly, I think that we're all nodding the heads that Lucan Biddulph's always looking to be a leader. So when it gets to that time, certainly come to us and we'll work through that. I think I'll leave that between staff.
just maybe one question. What is your expectation on timing, Brian? Because I'll tell you where we are after this presentation tonight, and based on, the comments from council. Typically what would happen is it goes back to staff, and staff brings a report to the next meeting. And assumedly we get legal, we have to get a legal opinion on it, which, I don't want to reinvent the wheel either. So I'll be talking to you about that. But we would bring a report forward to the April 4th meeting, and assumedly if everything is good to go, council passes the agreement and off to the races.
Yeah,
Are you good with
yeah,
that?
that all works. I mean, again, in a perfect world, I talked about it, our budget time is, we'd started up in the September, October, we go, in another perfect world, we look at our, we've done 5-year forecasts. We usually do in July.
Mhm.
I will say, in a perfect world, we have everybody on board by July so that we know when we're doing those, we have it. That being said, if the July deadline isn't there, certainly for the September, part of it that we need to have that stuff down. So we know that. So.
Okay, thank you very much. It was great to see you in person again, as I have repeated a number of times, but thanks for coming. Okay. Oh, yes.
Tomorrow, and this is for all the smaller sub watersheds within the Asable Bayfield area. Little Asable is one, and we've been working very closely with some of your staff on some projects here, so I think you'll enjoy the front page of this new watershed report card. So I will leave that, and our year at a glance from our annual report will give you a bit more information, and then I'll follow back up with more information about category 3 programs.
Appreciate that. And yeah, it's too bad Paul's not here, because he certainly has enjoyed working with your team and doing some of the projects that he's been doing around the municipality. With that, while Mary hands that out, I would ask for a mover and a seconder that we receive the information from the ABCA. Councillor Regan and Councillor Hodgins, all in favor, and that's carried. That's going to be on, is that going to be online as well? Yeah. They are, like, because then we can share them. We can share it on our social media. Okay. All right, moving on to the minutes. We have one set of minutes in front of us from March the 7th. If there is nothing to be amended, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder to approve those minutes as circulated. Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan, all in favor, and that's carried. Business arising from the minutes. I don't believe anything has been added. Councillor Regan?
If I could bring up a question, Madam Mayor, from that, from the business arising. I just wanted to ask about the development charges. I know it looks like we're having a presentation coming up on the 4th on 4th of April. And actually just what I'm just wondering is, I know that we've had a number of delegations that we've spoke to over the past few months. Anyway, I just was wondering if there's an update on that, if they've heard anything from the province as a result of those delegations, considering the fact that we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing. And I don't know if there's any update we could have this evening. And I just don't want the item to get lost, that's all. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
So through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Regan. The short answer is no. We haven't heard anything sort of constructive back. We've had meetings with, obviously, Ministry of Infrastructure. We had a meeting with our local MPP last Friday. Again, trying to sort of give them the impact of Bill 23 and what that means specifically to Lucan Biddulph and specifically to our projects. I like to think, the mayor can maybe help me out here. I'd like to think we got through to them so that they understand, and certain things like why isn't studies part or eligible for development charges? And I think we tried to explain to our MPP at the meeting last Friday. For example, we've just designated a whole new batch of property in our official plan as residential. In order to service that properly with water and sanitary, we need service plans. Why isn't that eligible? Tell me why that isn't eligible in the new Development Charges Act? Because the only reason we need that is because of growth. It is because of growth, and that's the whole definition of development charges. So, and I like to think he heard us, whether we're a loud enough voice in amongst everybody else, I don't know. Time will tell. But at this point, we're doing what we can to try and publicize what the impacts are to us.
I would just maybe add, I do think, I would say that our MPP heard us. And I think he understood. But he's not the one that needs to hear us and understand as much as he's our MPP. It needs to be the minister the Minister of Infrastructure and the Minister of Municipal Affairs. And so far, they haven't shown any interest in meeting with us specifically. I think that your lobbying groups, your AMOs, your Good Roads, your Romas, they're all doing what they can to lobby. It should be noted that once a month, AMO is supposed to have a meeting with cabinet ministers, and the cabinet ministers have not met with AMO since before Christmas. So that just goes to show you. But they're doing what they can. And I mean, we're not the only ones. If it's only our voice, I would say our voice is not loud enough. We're not a big enough fish in the sea. But every municipality is voicing these concerns, and we have a budget that's going to be delivered on Thursday. I don't know. We'll see.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a separate item for the business arising. I was just going to question whether we should add an item on there for tracking purposes for the communications plan, noting that we directed staff to bring back a report at a future regular meeting. Could we have that added to the, thank you.
Did you have a date that you wanted, or do you just want it to be ongoing just so that it's on our horizon?
I think ongoing is probably fine. I think it's probably just go to committee and then it'll come back.
Thank you for that. Any other comments with business arising? Okay, moving on to correspondence. As always, there's a number of items that have been received. We've got 2 that have been pulled. One is the invitation to the annual Middlesex Municipal Day. This time it is being hosted by North Middlesex, so it is not that far from us. I would encourage everybody to register. I think that North Middlesex is working with the county to put together a good day. I think they've got some Middlesex businesses or some North Middlesex businesses already lined up to be presented. So I think if you can make that day work, I would encourage you to let Tina know and she will register you for that day. The second item that was pulled, and this one was pulled on my request. There was a letter that was received from the warden that the warden sent out to the Solicitor General. And this was in direct response from the OPP. I think everybody is familiar with the MCERT program when before Christmas, when the retiring Commander Dean Croker was here, he spoke about it. Anyways, that program is in jeopardy of losing some funding at the end of the month. And so the OPP reached out to Middlesex to send a supportive letter, of which we did. And then the county is asking all the municipalities to also send a similar letter of support for the program. Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, when we presented to the Solicitor General at Roma, that was one of our asks, was that there be permanent funding for this program. So again, it is not just this program is not just unique to Middlesex, it is across the province, and we're just asking for some sustainable funding. So I would look to my colleagues to endorse this letter and send a similar letter to the Solicitor General in support of the MCERT program. If I can get a nod of the head, right? And then we'll work on that. That would be great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that support, as does the OPP and CMHA. There's another 18 items that are in your list. Didn't know if any of them wanted to be pulled from discussion by council. Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item number 1, we've got a message from the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Infrastructure regarding our Roma delegation looking for funds for our wastewater treatment plant. Looks like they haven't really committed to any funding in this letter. They've said the ICIP intakes are closed, the funding's fully committed, and there's no commitment from the federal government. So it seems like the province is saying the federal government won't put up money, so there's no money available. I think towards the end of the letter, they have encouraged us to call on the federal government and request more infrastructure funding. So just wanted to ask, what can we do as Lucan Biddulph Council to lobby the federal government for funding for our infrastructure?
If I may answer that one, Madam Mayor, through you, Councillor Hodges. That was one of the items we brought up and discussed with our MPP, Monty McNaughton, last Friday, is that we're going to be reaching out to our MP and trying to arrange a meeting and push for an extension or more funding, I guess, through this 1/3 infrastructure program. So we're gonna try and do that. Obviously, I would say our MP isn't on the right side of the floor of the House of Commons, but it has to start somewhere. So that's where we're going to start.
Okay, thank you.
Further to that, I can tell you at the county level that we did meet with Member of Parliament from London North, whatever they call that riding now, Peter Fragascottis. And that was one of the asks that we had, was that they open up that infrastructure funding, because I mean, the county's in the same boat, not necessarily for a wastewater treatment plant, but for infrastructure funding, that they could access that funding pool with. So that request has been made at the county level. And again, we also met with MPP McNaughton the day prior to Ron and I meeting with him here, and we furthered that request with him as well. So it's not, but I think the follow-up with MP Rude, and then maybe even just go to the city with one of the government sitting MPs, I think we can follow up.
And if I may, one other item to pull, it was just referenced in the AMO watch file for March 9th. There's some information there about the Drainage Superintendents Association of Ontario and AMO have prepared a template letter for councils to send to the Minister of Transport. And councils are also encouraged to support Warwick's resolution. This item pertains to these federally regulated railway companies that have basically refused to pay their cost for municipal drainage works. So recognizing we do have a lot of municipal drains here in Middlesex County, and I assume also here within Lucan Biddulph, I'd like to just table that for our consideration and look for council support in sending this letter to the Minister of Transportation, and also looking at supporting that resolution from Warwick County.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hodgins. Background on that, I would agree with you that should be something that we should be supporting. Our neighbors to the east, Perth South, this was an item that they really raised in the last term of council, along with Thames Center, and where those two municipalities were able to get some traction and some recognition. They were the ones that got AMO to run with this. So I would agree with you, and I would look probably either for the letter or the resolution to come back at next council, so we can endorse that. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Any other items that council would like to speak to? Okay, seeing none, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder that those items of correspondence be received for information. Councillor Hodgins and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? And that's carried. On to committee reports. Blue Water.
Yeah, we had a quick meeting, but I guess the recyclables are slowly going up. What we budget to what we're getting, it's getting close to where we had budgeted the per pound, so that's good news. Secondly, there was going to be a green bin I'll call it an experiment at one of the municipalities, but they've decided to hold that back and shelve it until the vendor responsibility recycling starts, so they can remove that from the expense of the ratepayers. So they didn't want to add that as an expense while the recycling was still paid for by them. So which is too bad, because with their expectations where they were going to do a trial run, and now they're not. So those two things for now.
Okay, thank you for that update. CEDC.
We have a meeting on March 29th at 6:30, and I'll have a report on that for council on April the 4th.
Thank you. Nothing from Lake Huron, nothing from, or the fire boards, I guess, maybe there is.
Just a quick update, not on any specific fire board, but just an update on our fire services master plan. Our initial rollout meeting is scheduled for March 28th. So I think that's next Tuesday, I believe. So that will be the initial meeting. They'll start interviews after that. So we are jumping in with both feet, and we should be able to hit the ground running.
Thank you very much. ABCA.
The February 16th minutes are attached within the balance of correspondence section. We had our second meeting last week on March 16th, followed by the partner appreciation dinner, which highlighted some staff awards. So highlights from the board meeting, there was a review of the 2022 financial statements. And just one thing I would highlight is that there was an unrealized loss in investment of $600,000. So it was significant loss in those equity and bond investments. We also got an update from Angela Van Niekirk on stewardship projects reviews. So this would be sort of those category 3 items, looking at all the projects that were done last year: tree planting, wetland restoration, erosion control, overwintered crops, and other things. So these projects are aimed at improving the watershed health. And it was a really good year for ABCA in 2022. They completed 137 projects, 8 of those being in Lucan Biddulph. Total value of those projects was $836,000, and $487,000 of that was supported through senior government grants. We also had the Source Protection Authority meeting, and there were some very significant updates that were approved to the source protection plans. That this has been in the works for about 4 years. So just some significant updates to those plans. So that's about it.
Okay, thank you for that. Parks and Recreation, the draft meeting minutes for February 22nd are in front of you.
I was going to do that.
Oh, you can do. I'm sorry.
No, don't be.
No. And now I'm
I was just waiting
confused.
to-
Now that we've transitioned to Paul, you giving the report. Now I'm all confused. Okay.
We had to talk. We got to figure it out. So thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So before you are the Parks and Recreation minutes from February the 23rd. I'd be very brief just to highlight some of the things that were discussed. We elected a chair and vice chair. I was appointed or elected as a chair, and Todd Bailey was vice chair. Paul Smith talked about programming rates. We did have a discussion about the community guide that Abby Van der Meeren did, and everybody was very happy and pleased with that. Abby also talked about summer students and hiring. And I believe she said, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we had 100% return of staffing that we had from last year. So we had everybody coming back for this year. We talked about the skate park relocation, the multi-purpose course, the location of that. Youth committee member was another thing we talked about. And we will meet again on April the 27th. And that's my report. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Staff reports. I don't think that there's anything from your office. Nothing from you. Finance, the accounts paid are in front of you. Planning, planning summary report for 2022. Dan.
Through the chair, thanks, Madam Mayor and members of council. So as you're all aware, the County of Middlesex does provide a planning services through a planning service agreement to Lucan Biddulph and has been doing so since 2012. And I hope it's everything you ever dreamed of. So with that said, 2022, obviously we had a lot of growth pressures more towards the initial point of the year. And then we did see a fairly steep decline, more so on the building permit side of the equation than necessarily on the planning side. But we certainly noticed a drop in planning application activity towards the end of the year. We were on pace to fairly significantly eclipse what we did in previous years. However, we did end up with overall 32 privately submitted planning applications. As you can kind of see in the report here, they were spread across a number of variety of categories. Some of the ones that I might highlight for you are consent to severance. We did have 13 consent lots. That's 13 new residential lots created through intensified development in our community. Also, we did have 5 site plan applications that were dealt with. Primarily, some were carryovers for 2021, but approved in 2022. Most notably, you'll see right next to us is the Z modular site being 280 Main Street. That's a two apartment buildings, 90 residential units and 1 commercial unit at grade. And you can kind of see it going up rather quickly in terms of modern and conventional construction techniques. And then we also have 315 Main Street, which is the West Elk commercial development, which we could very likely see commercial units occupying that site somewhere. I would say maybe late fall this year is kind of where they're aiming at this point. In terms of subdivision applications, we didn't receive any new applications for subdivisions in 2022. However, we did have carry forward active applications. So we do have about 8 applications that are active at this particular point in time. We had 8 applications active. We did close 2 during the 2022 year. That being the phase 1 of the Asable Fields subdivision, which is 14 single family home residential lots, just I guess southwest of our the community center here. And then we also had the final plan approval of the final phase of the Old Clover subdivision on the southern leg of Lucan there. So that's 55 single family homes, residential lots that are final plan approved and just ready for construction now when the construction activity picks up again. In terms of Middlesex County, so the county did do our broad official plan review in 2022. That was entitled Middlesex 2046. And what that did was it was looking at incorporating a lot of the provincial changes that have occurred since the plan had been updated previously. And then we looked at different policy initiatives such as like cycling strategies, the corporate strategic plan, as well as the economic development strategic update. And that is over consistent with Lucan Biddulph's official plan, the new 25-year horizon, hence the name Middlesex 2046. Along with that, the county also initiated the Attainable Housing Review in 2022. That is ongoing right now. And we're also, as some of your local staff is aware, we've been working on implementation of the digital planning file acceptance system that we have. That's through our cloud permit system. So your building permits right now are operated through the cloud permit system. And that's a planning module that we've been working on almost since 2020 at the county level with them. And it is, I'm happy to say, is operational at this point in time. So Lucan Biddulph specifically, we are accepting minor variance applications through the system. And we're slowly working our way through to open up all the different application types through that. So we're hoping that'll increase transparency and accountability in our application review and help us get towards those reduced timelines that we've been placed under, as well as get into a position where we're not having to issue refunds. So we're very excited to get that moving forward and implemented at all of our local municipalities. In terms of the township, we did have the township municipal comprehensive review, which was locally adopted by council this year. That is obviously still at the county for review. We are waiting, I'm sure the question is going to come. We are still waiting on word from the province as to what their results will be with the county official plan. Rest assured, we have at the county staff level reviewed the plan extensively that Lucan has locally adopted. We have provided our comments back to staff, and any changes that were necessary have been accommodated in a revised draft. So we're in a very good position to move forward with that as soon as the county official plan is approved. What would I say? So in terms of additional units in 2022, we did add 64 single family home residential units to the market. We also had, like I said before, 6 draft plan approvals. We have 3 anticipated applications coming forward, hopefully sometime in 2023. We're still trying to gauge what the market's going to do. But as you're all aware, planning doesn't happen overnight. It is a lengthy process. So most of our processes on the planning side haven't necessarily been affected at this point in time. But we'll see. Again, I think in terms of our development, we have a lot of multifamily development going on in Lucan right now, which is pretty fantastic. You're one of the only municipalities that is building multifamily development at this point in time, as well as some pretty substantial commercial development and industrial development. So that's helping us on the development charges side of the equation, keeping permits coming in and flowing through the system. So I'll just leave it at that. And if anyone has any questions, I'm certainly here to answer them. So I'll turn it back over to you guys.
Great. Thank you very much, Dan. And yes, I think that our arrangement is all that we had hoped it would be. Any questions or comments from council? Deputy Mayor Manders.
A lot of those, the development charges will probably were from last year, though, probably we collected, or some of that going to be this year, but probably, or I'm thinking a lot of that's last year.
Yeah, so in terms of development that's ongoing right now, a lot of that would have been collected under the Development Charges Act when the building permits were issued.
Okay.
There are Bill 23 has certainly thrown some changes to us across the board in all categories of planning. Development charges are one of those things that were obviously impacted as well. So there are changes as to how those get billed out at the end of the day and what date those charges get locked in. So that has changed based on previous iterations of the Development Charges Act. So just so the council is aware, when a site plan application is made, the date that the application is made is the date that gets locked in for the development charge being charged out. Previously, it was the date the building permit gets issued. So that could be a fairly substantial change based on the implementation of a new development charge bylaw coming into force in effect.
Okay. And then which again, I don't know it's beyond your control, but the county approved official plan. So when, when does disappointment set in for not being approved? When, you don't hold the timeline. Everyone asks us for timelines. We ask you for timelines. Does the government, does anyone have anyone's ear, or do you say that same thing in September and we hope for the best?
Yeah, so through the chair to Deputy Mayor, what I would say is the county is constantly involved in conversations with the province, especially the departments like in the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing who are reviewing the official plan. We're constantly a thorn in their side, trying to gauge when we can expect a decision on it and whether or not any changes are coming about through those plans. So all we can say is that we know that they're working on it. We know that the local office has completed their review. It's now with their seniors to basically review and recommend any changes that may be required. But as far as we are aware, we've had positive interaction with them, and we have no reason to think that it won't come forward, hopefully soon.
Thank you.
I answered your question without giving you anything.
Any other questions, Councillor Hodgins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Dan, your report mentions the county policy initiatives such as the cycling strategy. And I just wanted to ask for more information about that, whether that just applies to county roads and county business, or does that a policy that applies to the lower tier municipalities? And is that available to us here in Lucan Biddulph?
Yeah, so through the chair to Councillor Hodgins, what I believe that is more tailored towards the engineering side of the equation on the county roads aspect. I can certainly provide contact information and maybe even ask the county engineer to come back and provide a presentation on that. But what I do know is a lot of the county road rehab projects, especially the main arteries, are being widened to include the opportunity for cycling infrastructure to be included on our roads. The most recent one, I can't think of the name of it. Putnam, is it Putnam Road or not Putnam?
No. Like they did Medway, like, and then
Medway.
approved this year is down near Lambton, because it's gonna hook up to where, like, Lambton's already got cycling lanes, so it ends at the border, and so then we're gonna continue along there, but. Oh, Petty. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
So
Yes.
Petty
Yeah.
Road was rehabbed last year and did include the widened shoulders on it, which the intent is not to have a really large, fantastic amount of space for you to travel in your vehicle. It's actually more so to accommodate that cycle traffic on the road as well.
Okay, so it sounds like it's more geared towards just the county roads, and maybe it wouldn't speak to how we would look at cycling within our more local communities.
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, that's correct. It's more from a county roads perspective.
Okay, thank you.
The cycling strategy, I think, is online. If you go to the Middlesex website, I believe it's online, and like it is a 25-year document, because it is that when roads are rehabilitated, that's when we'll add it, the cycling lanes, that sort of thing. So it's going to take time to get it complete and get it to where we want it to be. So.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Just looking at the planning application, site plan approval and site plan control. So with the provincial changes and regulations, there's a lot more site plans that are going to be exempt if they're less than 10 units or something like that. So are we expecting then site plan approval numbers to go down and correspondingly to, I guess, not get those revenues for those applications in the future?
So through the chair to Councillor Hodgins, I would say yes, it's very likely to, and I think you're going to have very creative developers in the future that are going to leverage that to their advantage. But with that said, we recognize that from a good planning perspective, what the benefit is to site plan control. And really that's more so a detailed engineering review and design of a site and how it operates and functions. So from Not to say that we're forcing them down the path of doing a detailed site plan review. But we are looking at the opportunities of adding requirements in for things such as grading permits or site alteration permits. So at least we can capture those particular sites that currently are in a void to make sure that the infrastructure that is adopted on them will meet our municipal requirements. So we're not going to run into stormwater management control issues. We're not going to run into servicing issues, whatever it might be.
Okay, thank you. Is that something that would be reported back to council? I guess what those alternative tools are or methods that we will use in the near future?
Yeah, through the chair, I know right now Strathroy Caradoc kind of led the charge on that aspect. I know Middlesex Center is looking into it, and I know that we're looking into it as well. So the strategy that was adopted in Strathroy Caradoc was to add that the requirements in their site alteration bylaw to require these types of detailed engineering drawings as part of that process. And then they correspondingly amended their building bylaw to require a site alteration bylaw prior to the building permit being issued. So that it's kind of a two-prong approach there. And really the intent, again, is to just ensure that we're looking at those stormwater management aspects and controls, as well as sanitary flows, water, whatever it might be, that don't typically get reviewed just under building permits.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the detailed responses.
Any other questions for Dan on his report? Okay, seeing none. Okay. Okay, if I can get a mover and a seconder to receive that report for information, please. Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Regan, all in favor, and that's carried. Public Works, Jeff, you've got a gravel tender.
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor. So tonight I brought forward the gravel tender. It is something that does come every year. There's not a lot of surprise in this tender. We did tender to the to a number of local contractors. McCann Ready Mix this year was low tender. They came in at $164,450. It works out to be about $14.95 per ton. It is under budget. We did have a budget. I did put in a budget in the 2023 budget of $183,600. I would like to comment that I think we did get a pretty good price. I was expecting it to be slightly higher per ton than we got. So I am proposing that we do take low tender. And just one side comment, I did, we did review because a number of the contractors are local. So I did review that and took a look at that, but I am recommending that we take low tender and go with the McCann Ready Mix tender.
Okay, thank you for that, Jeff. Questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. It is good news that it's under budget. I think surprising.
Yep.
So maybe it is a sign of things to come. If I can get a mover and a seconder for the recommended motion in front of you to accept the tender from McCann Ready Mix for granular M gravel for 2023. Councillor Regan and Councillor Westman, all in favor, and that's carried. Thank you very much. Economic development.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. There's a draft agreement before you, before council with a report attached to it explaining the terms of the agreement regarding Summerfest concert for July 22nd, 23, in partnership with Great Escape RV. As discussed at previous council meeting, council directed staff to limit our contribution to the concert event to 10,000. And realizing we have a partnership with Great Escape, they came in at the same amount, but with the understanding that anything over and above our contribution would be covered by Great Escape RV with approved costs beforehand by both parties. Before you use the draft agreement for your review and comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Comments or questions on the proposed agreement and the report in front of you? Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this came about from our last meeting and our discussion about the report from last year. So I think there's a urgency to bring this forward with the timelines for getting everything lined up. I think it would have been great to see this go to the CDC committee just to get some feedback and get a sense of what those partners and stakeholders think about it. But through you to Lisa, I guess, is there an opportunity to bring this forward to CEDC next week? Or is it that much of a rush that we have to make a decision on this tonight?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Hodgins. No, we can definitely bring it back to the EDC. I'm not sure. The CDC doesn't oversee Summerfest, so I'm just not sure if we start kind of mixing worlds and budgets in a way that it would complicate things. So I would just look to council for direction on that, but Justin's away out of the country for right now, but that's.
I don't know, typically that sort of agreement, it wouldn't necessarily. This is an agreement between the municipality and another party. So would it typically go for essentially committee review?
So through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Hodgins, Lisa's correct. This typically is going to muddy the waters a little bit. And a lot of times these issues with booking bans and things like that are very time sensitive. So in the past, we have not done that. If where you're going with the question is that you'd like to get a wider opinion from people, maybe we can do that in a different manner. But to Lisa's point, I don't think we want to sort of add that to the list of EDC responsibilities, because that's not typically in their arena. So I guess the question is, are you looking for more feedback from people as to what the appetite is? Is that sort of where you're going with this? And
so yeah, I guess so. And I guess taking it to CEDC for input from those interested stakeholders is one thing, but I'm just thinking also from the broader public, because obviously a one night concert and a significant investment for that, it's going to be great for those people that attend the event and are interested in that or like that type of music, depending on what the music ends up being. But it's only, I guess, the event is kind of targeted for a certain demographic. And I'm just wondering if we should, look more broadly and how we can, I guess, make the most people happy with however we spend these funds. But I guess we have sort of allocated them to this Summerfest event, which has sort of become a concert event. So I'm just kind of, I guess I just wanted to get feedback from the community. If people are in favor of this event and putting the municipal dollars towards it, just recognizing that it's going to hit people that like that music for that one night, and it's a significant investment.
Trying to think how to answer that. I think to try and make you feel more comfortable, I think what I would suggest or what I would say is that we've learned from what's happened last year versus the year before, and I think based on what happened last year, we realized that, we're not a community, or this is not a type of event where we can do a concert on Friday night and another concert on Saturday. I think we have to stick to the one. And I think Lisa's trying to do that as part of her economic development and community building role.
Okay, no, thanks for that and good discussion, good points. And just wondering, another a comment, I thought it'd be great if we could maybe work with the sponsoring party to set it up such that the proceeds from ticket sales come back to Lucan Biddulph exclusively. This is the agreement with the other party is a sponsorship, and I'm just wondering if they're, you know, basically putting up money and then getting money back. And I guess they're not really paying for a sponsorship. I thought a sponsorship would be more like, you know, they're putting up $10,000, so they're sponsoring the event, they're getting the advertising and all of that associated with it. So I didn't know if there was if that was discussed, or if we just proposed and started with 50-50 and we go with that based on the previous model. But I thought it'd be great if we could try to negotiate things to bring as much, I guess, revenue back to the municipality as possible.
To you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Hodgins. I think initially, previous concerts, that was the scenario. But because of the significant investment that Gardescape is contributing, it's more than a sponsorship. It's basically a business partnership to ensure we have enough funds to actually run something for the larger event. If we were on our own, you know, we wouldn't get that sort of investment back. All the ticket sales do come back to us at the end of the day first, and then it's distributed as agreed upon after that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, then you have a recommended motion in front of you that report EDC 0423 be received, and that the attached agreement be executed accordingly. Mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Regan and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Councillor comments. Councillor Westman.
Yeah, I missed it in the Parks and Rec, but we have our first trails meeting on Thursday. So that'll be interesting to get the ball rolling on that. And I've already had some members of the public kind of ask questions about, you know, will we be doing bike paths? Will we be doing, you know, more accessible trails, you know, paved trails and things like that. So those would be good questions to put forward to the committee and see where we go with it. So thanks.
Great, thank you for that. Any other councillor comments? Councillor Hodgins.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just while I was reviewing the various items on tonight's agenda, just something came up, and I was wondering, and I think we have discussed it very briefly before, but just what the status of our current strategic plan is, and what next steps are, or if we have a current valid one, or if we're looking at a new one. Maybe that's something we had to deferred matters, but
Sometimes I do believe our office is bugged, because this topic actually come up. I actually discussed this with the mayor last week and said how or what was council's wishes as far as the strategic plan goes, because typically right about now is when we would typically call in the consultant to either update our strategic plan, or we could completely do another one. So, and then the question sort of expanded a little bit, such that with the branding exercise that Lisa has proposed, the new branding exercise, maybe we can wrap both of those into the same, have the same consultant do both. So that's kind of where we sit right now. We are going to be trying to move that one forward. So
I think we left it that you were going to reach out to the consulting company that we did the original strategic plan with to maybe have that update conversation. Okay. Any other councillor comments? Okay. Any changes to budget? No. Any notices of motion? Then we'll move right into our motions and accounts. So the first one is that the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph receive the attached accounts as paid for information as follows. That's for February 2023. And that's for $1,721,181.15. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Hodgins and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? And that's carried. The next one comes from our last council meeting, the future accuracy of permanent register of electors. I am not going to read the whole thing. It is fairly lengthy. And anybody that's watching can go onto the agenda to read the motion and go back to our last council meeting to see where this came from. But this was a request from Councillor Regan that it be brought up to address the concerns of the voters list and to make sure that future voters lists are accurate. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Regan and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? And that's carried. The next one that is in front of us, again, it's a very lengthy motion and it came again from our last council meeting, and it is with regards to barriers for women in politics. And again, I would suggest to those watching that you can go to our website and our agenda and read the motion there. If I can get a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Regan and Councillor Westman, all in favor, and that's carried. And then the next motion is that the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph authorize Ron Raymer to attend the OMAA 2023 Spring Workshop in Niagara-on-the-Lake on May 17th to 19th at a registration cost of $650 plus HST. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Westman, all in favor, and that's carried. We have three bylaws in front of us. Bylaw 1423 to establish various fees and charges. Did you have, I think we've spoken about this in length before. The Parks and Rec changes. Bylaw 1523 to authorize the execution of agreement with Great Escape RV, and bylaw 1623 to adopt and confirm all actions of our council meeting tonight. So the motion in front of us is that if no one cares to speak to bylaws 1423 through 2023 inclusive on their first, second, and third reading, that they be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, and read a third time and passed. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Hodgins, all in favor. And that's carried. And before I call the motion to adjourn, just a reminder that our next meeting on Tuesday, April the 4th, is our morning meeting, and we will be meeting at 8:30 a.m. So mark your calendars accordingly. That is in our schedule. We will see you on April the 4th at 8:30 in the morning, and a motion to adjourn at 8:17, a mover and a seconder. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Hodgins, all in favor, and that's carried. Thank you very much.